Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the second session in our Gen AI Special Interest Group. This session today actually is based on feedback from the recent AI symposium, where one of the big things that was coming out as on top of people's lists was around generative AI, but using generative AI in marking. And so today's session will be a panel discussion. We'll be looking at eMarking and particularly focusing on sort of essay style and short answer question marking. So we'll include in this things like advancements in AI, balancing AI marking with the human element, which is obviously really important, ethical concerns relating to AI and marking, and also how AI can actually enhance the reliability and consistency of exam results. So I'm really pleased to be joined by our panel today, and I'm going to hand over to each of you to just introduce yourself. So Ben, would you like to start?
Thanks, Nikki, and hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Rockliffe, and I'm the Deputy Director of Assessment at AlphaPlus. So AlphaPlus, we are an education services consultancy, and as my job title suggests, I work in the team that's responsible for preparing assessment content, assessment designs for our customers.
Perfect, thanks, Ben. Manjinder.
Thanks, Nikki. I'm Manjinder. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Graide, which is an AI-enhanced assessment and feedback platform. Works on essays, short answer text, and maths questions.
Superb. Vali?
Thanks, Nikki. I work for Vretta as a strategic assessment and partnership officer. And Vretta is a technology provider for assessments in K-12 and higher ed. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And James?
Hi, I'm James, co-founder of a company called Vision Marker that I've been the pleasure of starting with my dad, who's been a chief examiner for 25 years. And we mark exams using AI. So very happy to be in on this panel to share some thoughts.
Perfect, thanks, James. So it's really good to have you all on the panel today, and really appreciate you coming along. Just a little bit of housekeeping for everybody. We've got a really big group today, which is absolutely fantastic. So what we'll do is we'll use the chat function for any questions that you might have. Feel free to submit them whenever you want, but we will be looking at covering them as many as possible of them at the end, appreciating that we may get a volume. So we do have some pre-submitted questions as well, which we'll run through, but we will try and find time to answer as many of your questions as we possibly can. Okay, so let's dive straight in. So Manjinder, I'm going to pose this sort of first question to you. So the first thing is, what are the key advancements in AI technology? I mean, specifically around essay and short answer questions. And how do you think that those advancements actually improve the marking process?
Yeah, it's a pretty foundational question. I think you did a really good job of introducing the fact that we're sort of all here because of generative AI. But it's really important for me to begin before we even actually start to answer the question, to emphasize the difference between the two AI types. We've got the generative and we've got the classification. Now, classification's been around for a very long time. Generative is the newer type, is the thing that is getting all the media attention. Think of like ChatGPT and all that sort of good stuff. Now, many providers are trying to use generative AI to help with marking, but that's something you've got to be quite careful with because a lot of these models are susceptible to bias and they're often not explainable and they hallucinate quite a bit. And hallucinate's basically a technical word for lying. The really interesting thing here is that classification models, though they've been around for so much longer, have a lot of potential here. And they're the ones that have had a lot of improvement in the recent few years. For example, we've kind of moved away from the black box nature of these old-fashioned neural networks. And there's a lot more explainability now. And it's quite interesting that you can use these tools to reduce the volume that's required to train the models in the first place. So the principle there is that you can kind of take a process that's predominantly marking and reading of the work to more of one which is reviewing, which is inherently quicker and reduces workload.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. James, anything to follow up on that?
There we go. Yes, yeah, thank you for the point. I like to do a yes and. So yes, I think the massive pros of classification, all the prior research, it's what I did my PhD in, but I think it's what we can combine with these sort of new generative approaches that allows us to increase reliability, actually, I believe, increase fairness, reduce errors in the system, and all whilst making things sort of relevant. So yeah, that's where I sort of see things going in the space of using the best of both worlds in the technology. So yeah.
Great stuff. And Vali, anything to add into that?
So if we, thank you very much. If we look at the context of weak AI and what the developments are there, we'd see that AI technologies, especially eMarking, helps a lot with tagging based on the student features responses, as well as tagging based on the process data, and finally on the automated essay scoring. So these three main technologies would help a lot to improve the efficiency of eMarking.
Great. And Ben, I know you're quite passionate about this subject.
I am, yeah, and it's an area that I'm a relative newcomer to myself. So I've been doing some research for a project that I've been working on recently, and I've been trying to get my head around the different types of AI that can be used for scoring constructed response items. And looking at the academic research articles that I found out there, I sort of identified three main areas, and I was looking at this primarily through the lens of scoring writing as a skill as opposed to an essay about something. And the kind of tools that are used there are natural language processing, deep learning, and then the broader generative AI intelligence methods. So the natural language processing is around the AI looking for patterns in language and the way it's used by using algorithms and models to identify those. And that enables the AI to score the text provided on a much deeper level than, for instance, superficial characters such as spelling. It can look at things like inference and use syntactic parsing and semantics to look at the text at a deeper level. Then there's the deep learning, which uses computational models to replicate the processes done in the brain, to train itself on large data sets of manually scored essays, enabling them to predict scores and provide feedback with a high level of accuracy. And this approach is more useful, I think, for looking at the content of the writing as opposed to the form of the writing itself. And then lastly, the AI intelligence, the artificial intelligence rather, which draws together the things that I've just discussed, but also other systems as well, to adapt and move forward dynamically and enhance the scoring system as it goes. But this one is obviously the more recently emerging of the approaches identified.
Great, thank you. And anything to add from anybody on the panel? No. Okay. So moving on then, we've got sort of AI-driven marking systems, but there needs to be a balance between human expertise and AI, and that's to make sure that we actually get the accuracy and fairness in assessing student responses. So I'm going to stick with you, Ben. How do you think that we should effectively balance the human expertise with generative AI?
So I think the balancing act is put in place by making sure that both parts are part of the process. So making sure that there is a human in the loop who is supported by the AI, but also is able to monitor the AI themselves. The AI can do a lot of the heavy lifting, so it can do the initial review, it can analyze against detailed mark schemes and standardize the assessment and reduce subjectivity. But we need humans in the process to review samples of the AI scored answers, particularly those that are near any grade boundaries, if that's something that applies, or any outliers, to make sure that there are no errors or misinterpretations, and if there are, that they are checked. And then we need regular audits on bias and continuous training with diverse and updated data sets. Human oversight is particularly important in high stakes assessments for obvious reasons. and professional development for those involved in the AI within the awarding organisations or whoever it is that's operating it is really important. Assessment professionals are experts in exactly that assessment, but they're not necessarily experts. And I say this as speaking for myself, I'm not necessarily an expert in advanced computer systems. So providing training so that everybody who's involved in the service has a baseline understanding of what's happening and how it works is really crucial to make sure that it's a success.
Absolutely. Manjinder, anything to sort of add to Ben's comments there? You're on mute.
Get to be the first one to do that. So yeah, I think Ben's hit the nail on the head here, really. The context is obviously quite important because there's a difference between using these systems in summative marking and formative marking, because the high stakes nature of the former basically means that everything's quite situation dependent. So if you've got models that have been proven to be quite effective, then, you know, in a world where teachers are really overworked, you can use those systems to have low intervention in a formative environment. The teachers can focus on creating more personalized education. But if you're doing summative, because of the high stakes nature of that work, and it makes such a big difference in people's lives based on the outcome of those results, you can focus more on a review system, exactly like Ben said, and it becomes much more of a technical moderation process, like an updated version of what we're currently doing anyway. And then the key thing for me is that we would need to include definition cases, which we already do with moderation, and also include false, incorrect data to make sure we're vetting that moderation process. You don't want these checkers to just say yes to everything because the computer said yes. There needs to be a tool in there to make sure that everything's going well.
Okay, great. And I'm just going to add in one of the sort of pre-submitted questions here, because I think it's actually really pertinent. You know, I think people are thinking about the litigious side of things. So, you know, how do we give people the confidence? A test taker, for example, who, you know, doesn't feel that they've got the mark that they should have done, or it's an unfair assessment, and then finds out it's been done by AI. You know, how do we actually protect ourselves from those types of claims? So, anybody want to take that particular one? James, do you want to come in?
I'll go for that. Yeah. So yeah, my first takeaway from that is that a candidate should never sort of find out that there's been AI marked. This needs to be sort of transparent throughout the process of how and where these tools are being used. And so yeah, to sort of include it back into the first question, we pitch our software product as a co-pilot for marking. This is not the marking solution. This is a product that increases the efficiency of markers, allowing them to do the job better. So we, yeah, as I say, as many people have their terms from it, we'd like to turn markers into moderators that just make them, make teachers get back to teaching. So, and then that, with like the litigious side of things, yes, there should always be a right to review. And if there's legally defined in GDPR and a few other data protection acts globally. And yeah, from my personal experience, I had a GCSE geography exam that when I took it came back as a lower grade than we were expecting, but we were able to go, my teachers, knowing this type of work I was able to do, were able to submit it for a remark. That then sort of changed the process of bringing extra transparency to the system only when a teacher is able to intervene, whereas we're saying our system can provide that transparency from the get-go. It doesn't need to go through a remark process. We want to provide all the information, and that's our stance. Whether awarding organizations are different, but we provide this information to actually increase transparency and fairness into the system. So I'd say, I think there's another sort of question there about the GMAT and legal elements of that. And yeah, I think there's certainly, it's all about communication, transparency, and being accountable. Ultimately, this is not the final score, as Ofqual have said for a long time. High stakes exams will not be fully AI marked for a while. And we're just sort of building up that use case to show how and where are the appropriate times to use marking.
Yeah, I think it's the level of confidence that people may have in AI marking, isn't it? And actually us ensuring that we give that confidence. But I think in addition to that, the sort of human element of marking, we also know that's not infallible. At the end of the day, we moderate for a reason, and we moderate because you want to get that level of consistency across your marking, and you don't always get that. If you've got a big pool of markers, how are you getting that consistency? So Vali, anything that you wanted to add into that at all?
Thank you. I think to start positively, the human AI collaboration context, mentioning that the validation is by human as a prerequisite is a good start. So positive mention of a collaboration as well as validation by the human, where in marking, the repetitive or already predefined responses are marked through the AI, but if there is outliers, that goes to human marking. So that's clarity on a basic starting point would be something to start with for building the trust. And additionally, when we think of a junior or kind of a secondary person in the process, helping the mainstream process, where we have professional development training in traditional cases come into play. And here, training the model with the new data helps to keep up the balance where new anomalies are included in the training data. So that helps to kind of minimize the cases where the public could raise a concern about the efficiency of the AI technology. So I would say first, AI and human collaboration would be a very good positioning with the human validating the process, and also the training the data as a professional development done in traditional cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything to add into that? I know we've got a large number of comments in the chat with regards to complexities around, is it actually the human that might be more biased, and that complacency can drift in, moderators can get a little bit lazy, all of those types of things. The volume of people that you've got marking or moderating can be impactful. And anything else anybody wanted to add, Ben?
Just on that point around the moderators getting lazy, Nikki, I think that the AI doesn't necessarily, it doesn't replace the need to do the things that you would do in good assessment practice in any case. So regular analysis of the results, checking for the distribution of those results and looking for any changes drift over time, doing your diff analysis to make sure whether different groups are being marked in a different way. All of those things still apply and should be done, and allow you to flag up issues in the same way that they would do through a human mark process. As I think has been pointed out in the comments as well, we sometimes forget that the human mark process that we have that is commonplace at the moment isn't infallible in of itself, and we should be careful not to hold the new system up to a kind of higher burden of proof, a higher standard than the system that we have already.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually on an interesting discussion yesterday, raising that exact point, which was actually we already have quality assurance systems in place. We just need to think about what they're quality assuring. So, Manjinder.
Yeah, just to add to that, this fear of laziness, it is a real one. I don't want to necessarily call it laziness. It would just be more kind of reaffirmed validation, because you're being in a system where the AI is always correct. So naturally, you're more likely to eventually say yes rather than no. But you can solve for that by deliberately putting in red flags that are supposed to be picked up. So, and because your sample size can be a lot smaller because you're doing like specific validation, you could even have it so that, say you've got 1 through 5s in each assessment criteria, you can say, look, 20% of these are false. We know they are. So so you have to pay attention. Otherwise, these aren't going to work. And then you can use that information to see whether the alignment is correct and use more statistical analysis, exactly like Ben was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. And yeah, we've got a few comments in the chat about, actually, if you get the sort of right AI quality assurance in place, then actually you can improve the reliability, rather than the other way around. Okay, that's great. And there are a few other sort of questions coming in. Actually, quite an interesting one's just popped in for Frida, is about handwritten papers and how does AI deal with handwritten papers?
Do you want me to? Sorry, James, go ahead.
Well, yes. Handwriting is a very difficult topic, and I like to train it on my handwriting as it's rather awful. But yeah, our system sort of works to sort of bridge the gap between your traditional handwritten and more future forward-looking type-to-text responses and digital exams. So we're allowing that sort of seamless transition as places move to different exam types. As part of our system, as like it puts its hand up when it can't read, but this is the same best practices of a marker. If you can't read it, you can't mark it. So this is a sort of, we have our own internal statistical confidence levels in our ability to extract handwriting text. So yeah, that's where we sort of sit in. The company is called Vision Marker, and these are we have our vision systems to be able to sort of process and conceptually understand handwriting, diagrams, free-form maths, and then we have our marking systems that sort of is fed in from marking. But yeah, if you can't read it right, you can't mark it right. So that would be my take on handwriting.
Ben?
Similarly, I'm part of AlphaPlus is part of the AQA group, and AQA is responsible for processing a large number of GCSE scripts every year and A-level scripts as well. And so we don't have a system that does two things. We have two separate systems, an AI system that is capable of reading and converting the paper-based scripts into text, and then another AI system that would well, not that we do that for GCSEs, but we would have a separate system that would look at the AI-based marking as well.
Great. Okay. Right. I'm going to move into our next question, and we will come back to some of the comments in the chat. So the next one's about our ethical concerns. Obviously, the EU have recently sort of published their regulations and their act. This all falls into that ethical camp, which is, about what ethical concerns do arise really from AI, eMarking, and what strategies can we sort of implement to address those issues of potential ethical concerns, just maintaining the integrity of the assessment process, etc. So, Vali, do you want to start with that one?
Sure, thank you. So I think, as we mentioned earlier, there are two main issues I would highlight and leave the others for other speakers. So transparency and explainability. So we know that there's an issue of a black box in AI algorithms where it's not possible to explain a particular decision or a prediction by AI, and that creates or undermines the trust in the AI technology being used. So that would be number one concern, I would say, and explainability that comes out of it as well. So to make sure that we don't get into this, let's say, a case where we don't have anything to respond, the strategy to take would be to use a visualization, different like decision tree process, how decisions are made within the algorithms, so that, as mentioned by James, it's not like they found out something that they didn't know about it, but beforehand it was laid out in a way that it was clear, so we can go back and to say, yeah, that was explained earlier, and that's how it works. So we can go back and to refer to how we presented the information rather than, we didn't want to say it before. So that would be a very a good strategy to open up from the start and lay out the decision tree for that better stakeholder engagement.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so. And Ben?
I totally agree with what Vali said in relation to transparency, making sure that it's clear in specifications or any of the documentation that one, AI has been used, and two, how it's been used, and three, the way in which that decision arrived at is really important. The other things the other two that I would mention are bias. So making sure that the AI system doesn't inadvertently perpetuate biases that are present in the training data, because this can bake in educational inequalities rather than mitigate them. And then the other one is accountability. So if there is an issue, who is responsible for dealing that with the AI? And so in terms of dealing with those issues, in terms of bias, I think it's what I mentioned in the previous answer, making sure that you follow your regular quality assurance processes and do those data analyses to check that different demographic groups are being treated fairly and equitably by the system, and making amendments on the basis of those analyses. And then in terms of accountability, it's the human in the loop point that we made earlier, making sure that there is a clear role for humans in the process and being clear on what those are. And having clear protocols for if there are discrepancies between what the AI is producing and any human grades that are available. So those are the points I would want to raise.
Great, thanks. And Manjinder, you're very much nodding your head there. You got anything you wanted to add in?
Yeah. Basically, it's funny because Vali and Ben have basically picked off the first two of my three primary ethical concerns. So bias and then lack of explainability. The third for me is lack of access to technology. So really quickly on the first two, bias can occur when the data in the models has been trained on has inherent bias. We always say humans have inherent bias, and of course we try to fix that with use of rubrics and moderation, but sometimes those things can still pass through. So because these models are designed to find the best fit and the fastest way to get to the correct result, if any bias exists, it will find it and it will propagate it. So for me, a way to mitigate this is to make sure that the labeling of the data is quite wide and clear. So if you've got any ancillary correlations, say that you're biasing based on gender or region or anything, because the data is there, you actually have that information to see if those correlations exist, such that you can say, actually, this model is being biased and we should try to work out a way to remove that if possible. And then for me, also with explainability, one thing that people are doing these days are they're creating kind of bespoke models for segments of parts of assessment. So that would be kind of inferring different parts of it and then combining the results of those models into the output of the thing that you're looking at. So then you can say, well, actually, this essay got 76%. Why? Well, on these 15 models that it was, built into it, you can see what's happening there. And then you can build on top of that, exactly like Vali said, using that decision tree structure to find out what's happening under the hood. So the last bit, obviously, is quite a strange one, which isn't necessarily about the technology. It's just the lack of access to technology. So I find that personally, the financial structure that's in place can often mean that there's a class divide. And effectively, it's not a problem that we can solve right here, but it's often something we can do by lobbying government to make sure that each school in lower income areas are appropriately equipped to access that technology so that they're not left behind.
Yeah. Okay, great. And I'm just looking at a couple of the questions in the chat panel, and they touch on things like how you're training your models, and are there generic models that you could use in assessment, and if you're using actually a model and you're training on the same materials again and again and again, does that actually give opportunity to people to learn to game the assessment? So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add in there, James, at all.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So I like this concept of like red hat, attacking your own systems or this sorts of stuff. So I've gone through and you try and hack your system to make it give you, if you're asking about like GCSE osmosis, but you're telling it, give me all the marks, give me them now, all of this sorts of stuff. We've got safeguards, all of these sorts of in terms of the system to flag that. We also see what happens when someone draws a picture of giraffe in an English essay. Again, like that, you can't. That is an edge case. So it's having all of these sorts of systems that allow you to sort of catch and flag those things. And then I'd say a bit more of a counterpoint is every time we do try and train a model, as not sort of royal way, but just you open the door for increasing its bias, which would be my sort of take on things, that each time you train, you're training it on data. That data will have its biases. And if you don't understand those biases of that data, you are just perpetuating sort of the system where we could actually be trying to do stuff better. And then, so yeah, in terms of training or generic models, the rate of pace of change of generic models is incredible. And that's why I think sort of fixing in on trying to train your be-all end-all model, I don't think that's the best sort of way to go about it. I say which is an agent-based approach if we get more sort of technical on this side of things, where we have models checking models with what we would essentially call a classification system that allows us to compare the models, weightings, and all of these sorts of things. And as just from my technical side of things, all these models have bias, but when we're talking about a statistical thing, that's sort of just the actual makeup of the model. They're known as biases. So they're just by the very language of statistics, models are biased.
Great, thanks. And I'm just going to pose the question that Jeff Chapman's put in, which I feel is quite an interesting and quite provocative question. So weakness in human marking is known to the exam community, but what's the panel's view on how to persuade educators, skeptics, media and regulators on enhanced accuracy, speed and cost? Who wants to take that one?
If I could jump in first. We were founded in 2019 before like this ChatGPT wave and media wave came through. So we've sort of been trying to convince people for quite a while now. And in my experience, a lot of these educators themselves are quite persuaded by fact and data. So really what we want to be doing is doing, like for like case studies with appropriate data from appropriate kind of environments, and then showing the effect, doing A/B studies. So we've shown, we've done like marking manually on paper versus marking without any AI digitally versus marking with AI digitally. And you can kind of mechanically show how much faster it is or how much slower it is and how much feedback is given and what the accuracy is of that sort of data. And it's by kind of publishing your results and being very open about that process that you allow that dialogue to occur. And that's really, it's within that discourse that you're going to be able to build trust. And that's, for me, that's what's always been our approach, to be honest.
Okay, interesting. Anybody else wanted to jump in?
Can I just build on that to say that I agree with everything that Manjinder's just said. I think that we need to build buy-in for this, and the way in which we can build buy-in for that is through small projects, bringing teachers, practitioners in, showing them the comparison, letting them see the difference, also letting them explore the trade-off that, okay, maybe it's slightly different, but is that difference enough to justify the difference in time and resource that would be required to implement the alternative method? The other thing I think is part of Jeff's question as well, costs. People will vote with their feet if they can see that we're able to significantly reduce the cost of administration of tests, feedback, assessment, or indeed time as well. There are examples of tests out there which are fully AI supported, and they are significantly cheaper than the other tests that are out there in certain cases. And we are starting to see uptake on those tests that have those reduced costs on that basis, as they're shown to work and they're given support from academic institutions or receiving institutions on the back of them. So there's a couple of ways we can look at it.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Anything to add, Vali?
Yeah, I worked for about 10 years in Azerbaijan for a high-stake assessment organization that was predominantly organizing high-stake assessments on paper and some on computers. And I can see even now in discussion with them on the use of AI, there's a hesitation. There is a data-related hesitation because of if we want, as other panel members mentioned, to try with like a short pilot to showcase the benefits, there needs to be a pilot, right? So the piloting requires data, and the data like kind of approval process, whether to give the data to play around on a real data of the organization, that is a challenge. And I think finding out where the lowest stake is and providing free resources to play around the data that the organization has is a safer journey to start with. And that safer journey builds a little bit of a trust on an organizational level. And then on a policy level, on a legal stand, there could be a different discussions going on to push to link it to the higher goal of a country or the organization. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think there's several sort of things that I've been on recently and watched, and we're all learning all of the time, aren't we, about how things work. But one of the key, I think, messages that I have heard is about don't try and do it all at once. Actually, do it incrementally. Have a plan of what you want to do, and but don't throw everything at everybody all at once. Do it small scale, really. James, anything you wanted to bring in there?
Yeah, it's all fantastic. I agree with what you're saying, and if you want to move on to other topics, happy to do so.
Okay, great. We've got a few other questions coming in, and I will come back to them. But I just want to just have a look at our final question to the panel, and then look at some pre-submitted questions if possible. So I think this question is around sort of what technologies actually enhance the reliability and consistency of the exam, and what measures can we take to sort of continuously improve these systems? James, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, so I would start with feedback on the feedback. That's the sort of element to start with. So it's always a learning process, and so as the pilots build, organizations learn how to use technology, what they can sort of unlock with this new type of technology. That some are just sort of random things that hadn't even been thought about. So with one test we were doing on sort of maths papers that were handwritten, in our sort of extraction of the students' final answers and their workings out, it provides far more context to what the actual mark is. So instead of having a database of 1s and 0s or 5s for the question, you can actually then see, well, what has the student written, and then sort of a breakdown of most common wrong answers, which you wouldn't have with it just having a 0 instead. So this sort of, we found by accident, as just part of an inherent element of our software that allows this further development of what assessments can be and how they can sort of move going forward. So it's essentially integration. The more, I say, we're an API company, we sit in the background, all of that sorts of stuff. The more integrated systems AI can be into the sort of exam stack, the better the outcomes can be. And as I say, making the exams more reflective of future skills that are needed. That you can write an essay, but does that make you a good sort of salesperson or something like this? We can actually change how and what assessment is through greater application of AI and more personalization.
Yeah, personalization is really critical now as well, isn't it? Anybody else wanted to pop in on this one?
I just want to really quickly add, we talked a little bit about moderation, but one of the really big benefits of moderation is that, AI within moderation, is that these models can be used to identify outliers much more effectively than the current sampling system. So currently, you take a X% sample from the data. If there's a Y%, issue rate, you're only going to see a small amount of issues within that sample. Whereas because you can use an AI model to check through everything and pick out outliers, if you get 100% sampling, and that's huge. So you can just immediately, right now, improve the moderation process, like without any additional risks right away. And that's a really good kind of safe test bed, because really what you're doing there is you're looking at the efficacy of the system in a way that provides value and isn't additional work. Because let's face it, like these exam times are such intense periods, trying to add in an additional layer of thing is going to be hard. So.
And you just mentioned volume there. Actually, there's a question from Gordon around, are we reliant on large volumes? Do we have to be reliant on large volumes in order to, sort of validate what we're doing? It would can smaller populations actually help to, sort of train the assessment model?
If I can go real quickly, I appreciate I've been talking a lot.
No, it's fine.
The short answer is it depends. Our systems don't require a lot of data. So we've shown efficacy with like 5 to 15 to 20 data points, but certain systems require more data, and it kind of depends on other issues. I'm sure everybody else can talk about that as well.
Nikki, I just wanted to come back to your point on reliability and consistency to just say that I think one of the key things around that with AI is that it removes the kind of key element of examiner fatigue, bias, and all the rest of it as well, because we all know the effect that a person whose script is marked at 9 o'clock on Monday morning versus a person whose script is marked at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon may well get a different experience, because we're all human beings and we all get tired and we all struggle to maintain a consistent standard as we work our way through this. AI enables the same approach to be applied through the same prism to every script or answer that is produced, which can support fairness. There are the risks with that as well, isn't there, in that it can also consistently apply something wrong as well. But providing that it's used well, then I think that consistency will run through the AI, and it helps moderate and standardize the application of mark schemes throughout the marking process.
Right.
Yeah,
Vali?
I would add to what Ben mentioned in terms of consistency in his scoring and marking. That if you look at the main three technologies, I would say adaptive testing, say scoring, and interface behavior analytics would be top three. And I would point out more on the last one, because the interaction that the student has with the digital interface is quite the information that we can use to increase the information on how the student performs, whether the time needed to respond to question is short or long. That contributes to understanding the confusion or misunderstanding, whether there was a guessing. So this type of information, I think, could help to increase better understanding the student, as well as contributing to validity and reliability of assessment.
Absolutely, great. James, sorry, I keep leaving you to the end, but is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I'd say it just in terms of technology in marking, I can say my co-founder, my dad, has been marking for 30 years. I'm 31. There's sort of images of like the stacks of papers that used to be sent to our house as I've sort of grown up with it, and we're now in this place where it's all online. Even if your students are taking digital papers, they're being marked. Physical papers, they're being marked digitally online. Apart from the sort of the edge cases of large print, extra bundled information. Let's say the technology, I'd be hopeful for change, is that but it does take time, is my sort of takeaway, that whilst, the rate of AI pace, you look at other industries and sort of racing away, and lack of ethics sort of abound, and that's where we need to make sure we are applying the best principles all the way through. It takes time is my sort of main takeaway, but we will get there, and we will sort of improve the outcomes for students and awarding organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, there's a couple of I think quite controversial questions that I'm just going to pose to the panel. So Steve actually is talking about training data, and training data is predominantly based on human marking, and actually that brings with it underlying bias. It is essentially. So his question is, from an example of experience, the vast majority of markers are white middle class. And how do we ensure a wider range of cultural, racial and social economic experiences in the marking data? Manjinder, you look keen to answer that one.
So I think that's a brilliant question. I think right now the systems that we have in place are propagating those issues. And one of the things that we can do now, if we do have AI enhanced kind of workflows, is that because of the reduction in the amount of effort that's required, you can be careful and actually make sure that the people who are doing the marking and the people who are labeling that data are representative of the communities that are actually submitting those exams, because of the improved efficiencies that you get. So actually, in my opinion, this is an enabler.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Anybody else have any views on that?
So I think this diverse group representation issue is not something new. That is also in the test review process, and there are different guidelines around by International Test Commission to make sure that the review process is embedded in a way that there's no any bias. So the same approach is taken in the marking pool, where the AI with the feeding with the experience coming from different assessment cycle could help to make sure there's a balance act there as well, so that there is no any anomalies that would make one group take over in terms of the perception. And AI could help once those indicators are clearly put into the algorithm.
Okay, great. Yes, James.
Well, I would say to expand what a mark scheme or rubric is, because we sort of only ever work off of mark schemes in this sense, but this is an AGI where it's sort of thinking for itself. We are explicitly using standardized mark schemes in the world of assessment. And so if those aren't representative of people's different opinion, life experiences and those sorts of things, then that won't be taken into account to a greater extent. So what I would sort of vote for is to increase sort of size of mark schemes, if that makes sense, for expanding out the possibilities of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So yeah, that would be how I would help address the problems as well.
Yeah, excellent. Anybody else, anything on that point?
I just want to say that I think it presents real opportunities, as others have said. And if we take the case study of assessing the skill of writing, historically, there are tests that assess the ability of writing, and they may be offered in one particular geographical area. So we might test the skill of writing English in the UK and apply UK systems of spelling, punctuation and grammar through the mark scheme, but they may not be appropriate in the USA. And providing that you're wanting to test English, the construct of English writing generally, you're able to include evidence within your corpora, within your data bank of the different uses of English in Australia, the UK and America, wherever you want to be, and then the AI will be able to mark accordingly and credit both of those different ways. Conversely, if you do want to test just the English use of the UK English, then you're able to set your mark scheme and mark accordingly, so that you could mark the US spellings incorrect, for instance. But you have the flexibility to to use either one or both of those systems according to your specific construct that you want to test.
Perfect. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to go over to some more of the questions in the panel. They are quite varied, so please do bear with me just one second while I've been trying to keep an eye on them all coming in. Everybody is really asking lots of questions, which is great. Just before I go into the panel questions, there is one question that I wanted actually to post out to the audience. I think we've probably got, looking at the questions, we've probably got a lot of different levels of experience with AI, and some organizations who are much further down the road with implementing some form of generative AI in marking or in question writing, etc. And I think we're all at different levels. But for those groups who are not really using AI for marking, could you just tell me what the biggest reason is why you're not? What's sort of putting you off? Because I think there's a few quite people who are newer to AI, and I think that might be quite interesting for them to see. So I'll pose that one and let you all come back to me on that. So John has posed a couple of questions, I think. Just bear with me. So what's the panel's perspective on the use of AI to assess demonstrations of skills-based activities? So maybe video, analysing video and those types of things. Any thoughts on
that? Yeah, I can. So in terms of what we're trying to do, it's something that our system is sort of capable of. We pitch it as any you ask it, we mark it is our sort of tagline, in that the skills-based thing, whether that's sort of plug-in in terms of electrical wire and diagrams, it's if that's being videoed of someone installing a heat pump, something like this, it would be accessible with the right sort of contextual understanding of what correct is. So we won't say this is how you install a heat pump, but with the right sort of paired sort of, I don't know have the exact words for it there, but the right know-how of doing it correctly, then putting that into if that's filmed and put through our sort of API system, that's something that is possible. And I'd say we haven't found a question we can't mark yet. So please do speak to us, and we love to give it a go. So I think that possibly translates to another question I was seeing in terms of the marking of speech or like other languages. Again, sort of GCSE, spoken French. I got a D in GCSE, so it's not my French. It's not my speciality, but our system is able to mark spoken GCSE French in this sort of way, that because it's being applied in a standardized manner. So it's all the sort of the standardization process of the mark scheme, what's being assessed, and then our system is, as I say, was vision first. It could be hear marker if it's something marking sound, but that's what we do.
You might need to work on your marketing techniques there, James. Anybody else got any comments?
It was just a comment on Aisha's question about the assessment of speaking as well, and I think that I've been doing a little bit of look at this. I can't speak with a great amount of detail, but the one thing to just kind of think about when you're looking at assessing speaking using AI or computer-based systems is to think about the construct that you want to assess and whether the model, the AI model that you want to use is appropriate. So AI is capable of many things and can mark spoken speech, but is it actually replicating the speech in the way that you would want to for the particular construct you're assessing? So if you're doing an English assessment and you're wanting to assess natural conversation, I think we all can all agree that it's slightly different talking to a human being compared to talking to a computer, and the natural ability to turn take or take visual prompts and cues, etc., might be different. So that's fine, if providing that you're aware of those differences in the construct that you're looking to assess, and you account for those in your qualification design and your validity approach.
Perfect. Anything to add, Manjinder?
Not much really. Okay. The models these days with regards to the mode of input have been significantly improved. I think I just saw a comment regarding Google Gemini's video model. OpenAI's vision and voice models rolling out to people this week, I think. So the point being here is that provided you can analyze the input through whatever mechanism that you do, I think James said it perfectly. You have vision and you have marker. So provided you have the contextual ability to understand the input, you can build an interface between the two things.
Right. And Vali, anything to add on that?
I really liked Ben's hesitative response and making sure we are not overusing AI and forgetting about the construct that we have to measure. So in that line, I would say the game-based assessment, I mean, it's not connected to like on a video or image, but where the behaviors of a student in terms of information and how it helps to understand what processing or cognitive behavioral processing is going on, that information could help a lot. And as I mentioned earlier in my response, that is quite of a strength of AI in the modern assessments. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so I'm just having another quick scan through. So Joanna raises a point around neurodivergent students and how they might interact with these sort of systems. Any thoughts of that? There's been quite a few cases recently, hasn't there, around MCQs and autistic students and how they're probably not able to manage the multiple choice elements of the questions. Is there anything on that anybody's doing any work on that might support neurodivergent students?
Well, yeah, I'd say we support the awarding organisations in how they wish to assess the students. So we aren't forcing them to be paper only or digital only. It's with the skills of the awarding organisations, psychometricians out there to be able to construct the tests in a way that give fair representation to people's neurodiversity. I as a dyslexic, I was given more time in my exams, and whether that's the best way to adapt that sort of knowledge, or it's like changing the fonts that makes it easier for me to read. These are things that can be more easily integrated in a digital thing where you sort of pick and choose your fonts. So yeah, I've been very I've been both a beneficiary and I'm wanting to support it going forward. So yeah.
Right. Sorry, Steve, you're obviously saying that Joanna's question was actually about essay responses, not MCQs. And that neurodivergent writing often has different patterns and structures that can be flagged by AI detection software and AI generated software. Okay, so we're sort of coming to the last couple of minutes of the session. Is there anything any of you on the panel would like to add to anything that we've done at all?
I had a really quick comment on Joanna's comment. So yes, I personally do not advocate for using AI-generated content detectors. They don't work, they're biased, false positives are through the roof, and exactly what you said, neurodivergent writing often has those patterns that flag up in those things. If you're worried about GPT-enabled cheating, I recommend using a history tracking system, something like Google Docs. We have one built into our platform. It's much more reliable and it allows you to have a discourse with the student, which is the most important thing.
Great, thank you. Anything to add, anybody? Great. Well, I'd really like to thank you for all being on the panel today and giving us some absolutely great insight. I'm sure everybody will agree. There is a form in the chat if people wouldn't mind filling in that form to tell us what you think. What did you think of the format? Would you like to see something different? Would you like to see something the same? So if you can fill in that form for us, we'd appreciate the feedback. And again, just a big thank you to the panel for coming on and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you
for moderating.
Thank you. Thanks, Nikki.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.